So I peel the label off first, and then I scrub the can. Oh, hello. You know, I just love the smoothness and the flavor of almond milk, the rich creaminess of cashew milk, and the simplicity and versatility of rice milk. But sometimes I just want something that's more difficult to make, but doesn't taste quite as good. Something like bean juice. No, not from kidney beans. I'm talking about soy. Yes, tonight we're making soy milk. You'll need soybeans. You should be able to find dry soybeans in most health food stores, many grocery stores, or you can purchase them online. The only other essential ingredient is water. Adding something such as vanilla helps to make the soy milk more palatable, but I'm all out. Several recipes suggest adding a chunk of raw ginger. This adds a crispness to the flavor, which does help a bit. I also added a little bit of sugar, not enough to really make it sweet, just enough to take the edge off. You will need a blender for this. You can try doing this with a food processor, but a blender will work much better. Also essential is something with which to strain the soy milk. I use a combination of a wire mesh strainer and a clean kitchen towel. You can try using a coffee filter, but I've had limited success using those for this purpose. You will need a large pot. As you will see later, this pot is not big enough for the batch I am making. You might also want to keep a spray bottle of water on hand to prevent boilovers. I'm using 2 cups of dried soybeans. This will make about half a gallon of milk. You'll want to put the soybeans into a strainer and sort through them, picking out any bad ones, any stones, or anything like that. Next, you'll want to rinse the beans thoroughly under cold running water. If you've ever cooked dry beans before, these first few steps are surely familiar to you. Next, pour the beans into a bowl or other suitable container and cover them with water. The exact quantity of water is not important at this point, just make sure it covers the beans by at least an inch or two. Then cover them with a towel or something to keep out flies and dust and let them sit for at least 12 hours. I often start them soaking the night before, or I start them soaking in the morning and make the soy milk in the evening. After 12 hours or so, the beans will have swollen tremendously and their hulls will be loose. At this point, you have the option of removing the hulls. Skinning the beans will result in a smoother product. I don't usually do this, and I will explain why later on. If you choose to do so, the best method I have found is to simply gently squeeze the beans between your fingertips, and the hulls should slide right off. The next order of business is to drain and again rinse the beans. Just give them a thorough going over, again with cold running water. Next, pour the beans into a blender. Depending on the quantity you are making, you can do this in batches to make it easier. Here's a good rule of thumb for this step. For each cup of dry beans you started with, you will be using 1 quart of water. Since I started with 2 cups of dry beans, I will be using 2 quarts of water in this step, and I will need to do this in 2 batches. You can adjust the recipe up or down to make more or less soy milk as you desire. So, again, just in case I have made this confusing, if you started with 1 cup of dry soybeans, you will be blending them with 1 quart of water. Blender settings vary, so just give them a good spin for about 5 minutes. If you worry about your blender overheating, you can do this a minute or a half minute at a time. Just remember that your goal here is to liquefy the mixture. The texture you are looking for is that of a partially melted milkshake. After the beans have been thoroughly blended with the water, you will need to strain the mixture. I do this by placing a wire mesh strainer over the pot I will be using and lining it with a clean kitchen towel. You can also use several layers of cheesecloth. Next, simply pour the mixture through the strainer until it fills up. It will fill up. If you wait for the liquid to drip through, you will be waiting a good long while. What you will need to do is gather up the edges of the towel or cheesecloth you are using and twist them, making a nice little package. Now, just twist and squeeze and squeeze and squeeze until most of the liquid has been extracted. This does take a little while, and it's a bit messy, so here's another method I stumbled across that I like much better. Twist the towel as before, but leave it in the strainer and simply press down on it. This will be faster, less messy, less of a hassle, and you may even get more liquid out of it. Once you have extracted as much liquid as you feel comfortable with, you're left with something called okara. This is actually one of the reasons I make soy milk. It has many uses and it deserves a video of its own. So seal it in a bag or a container, put it in the freezer, and stay tuned. Now, you can surely see, as I should have, that this pot is too small for that much soy milk. I am making 2 quarts of soy milk, and this pot has a maximum capacity of 3.2 quarts. Keep watching to find out if this was a bad decision. You will want to use a pot that has at least twice the capacity of the amount of soy milk you are cooking in it. That could mean either making a smaller batch or using a larger pot, both of which are options that were open to me. It is at this point that I added 2 smallish chunks of peeled raw ginger. This is also probably the best time to add sugar if you are doing so. I added about 1/4 cup, a small to moderate amount for 2 quarts. Stir in the sugar, or agave syrup or honey, and bring the soy milk to a boil. The reason we cook the soy milk is to deactivate an enzyme inhibitor that makes it difficult to digest. Boiling it for about 15 minutes does the trick. Now the soy milk will probably already be frothy when you put it in the pot, and it will foam up extraordinarily as it boils. There are a few things you can do to prevent it from boiling over. Firstly, you can and should stir it periodically. Keep it on medium-high rather than high heat. As the foam starts to rise, spray it with cold water to drive it back. And, perhaps most importantly, use a bigger pot. You've made soy milk before, you know how much it foams up and what a mess it makes when it boils over, so why didn't you use a bigger pot for a bigger batch? There it goes. Now take that sucker off the heat. I show you this that we may all learn from my mistake. Cook the soy milk at a low boil, not quite a simmer, for at least 15 minutes. One more thing. A vegan I know recently told me that if you cook the soy milk before you strain out the okara, you will extract more of the carbohydrates, and the result will be a sweeter soy milk. I have not yet tried this myself, but if it is true, that may become the way I do this from now on. It may also be a good idea to deactivate the enzyme before you extract the okara. I told you earlier that I would explain why I choose not to dehull the soybeans after soaking them. The reason is that they contain fiber. If I remove the hulls, the okara will have less fiber, and that is one of its great nutritional attributes. Although I dislike soy milk as a drink or poured over cereal, I still make it for 3 reasons. Okara I have talked about. Another reason is that soy milk is excellent in baking. When used in bread, muffins, or other baked goods, the flavor of the soy milk is nearly undetectable and, to me, wholly inoffensive. The third reason I make homemade soy milk is that from it I can make homemade tofu, but that too is another video. Once you have cooked the soy milk for at least 15 minutes, let it cool down for a little while, then pour it into a pitcher or other container. It will keep well in the refrigerator for 3 to 5 days. The okara will keep very well in the freezer for at least a month. You can use the soy milk pretty much just as you would any animal milk or other vegan milk. Well, that was a rather involved process, and the soy milk has an interesting flavor, but I can't wait to turn it into tofu, and to see what I can do with that okara. Tune in next time for information on something else.